This meeting of the Board of Education is now called to order. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome, and we'll get started by approving our agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda as printed? Very good then. Is there a motion? Page 2, please.
President Van Antwerp, I move that the Board of Education approve the agenda as printed.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We'll proceed with our agenda as presented and go right to the superintendent's report. Mark?
Oh, thank you, Randy. We have several items that we'd like to report on today. And the first is just to, out of respect of some staff members' times, we have Chelsea White Oak is here to talk about a proposed trip that that she wants to do, and I'll let Chelsea explain what she's doing, and then we can take it from there. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I am representing Team Music in Portage Northern High School today. So choir, band, and orchestra would be combining to take a trip to Ireland in June of 2026. The purpose is to have students playing, singing, experiencing other culture without a language barrier, so that's why it's Ireland and not, say, Italy. And we will be touring around Ireland, several different locations, as well as performing in several different old churches, different venues, along with some fun things like getting to partake in some of their what's called Gaelic games, touring some museums there, as well as going to the Cliffs of Moher. Just a really jam-packed itinerary. We're using Bob Rogers Travel, which has been used pretty abundantly with the music program for the past couple of years. Mostly, we just want students to experiencing something bigger than themselves, and we decided that we wanted to do all of us so we can hopefully have a better turnout within students, and then also combine for like a final number in each of our performances while we're there.
Has there been any trips to Ireland recently?
The last trip would have been in 2017.
Okay.
I thought it was great how they broke down the financials so that if kids really wanted to go, they could get a job and kind of pay in increments versus asking for a whole amount at once. So that makes it accessible to everybody, and that's...
Yeah, we wanted to start early, so that would take some burden off of our families and our students. We do have some fundraisers planned as soon as this is approved, some can drives, some sponsorships that we'll be asking for to also lessen the burden on our families. I will say that the trip has to have at least 50 participants in order for us to go. If we don't hit that 50, then I might be coming to you with a different trip in mind.
So you said 50, 50?
50.
50, okay.
50, yes.
I'm assuming based on current feedback from students that it looks very achievable to hit that 50?
It does look very achievable at this moment in time, yes.
Yeah, it sounds like it could be life-changing for
Yeah,
so.
Yes.
that's our goal, hopefully. Any other questions for me while I'm here?
I just thank you for your willingness to put this together for our students. It's great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for hearing me today. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Chelsea. All right, and next we have bond project update. Mr. Edwards?
Thank you, Superintendent Veland, as well as the Portage Public Schools Board of Education. Starting in terms of our presentation tonight, Central Elementary School, the carpet has been installed in most of the learning studios or the classrooms. In some areas of the school, the painters will be painting their second or final coat. Wall protection is being installed throughout the school. Sound panels and acoustical spray are also being installed throughout the school. And then the electrical work of piping, conduit, and pulling wires continue throughout the building. Over at Haverhill last week, the staff at Haverhill were able to tour their new school. The event was well attended by the staff. The vast majority of the staff participated, including support staff members. They were overwhelmingly impressed with the progress of the construction. Many of them were speechless and were amazed at the amount of space available. They often remarked that the building is much larger than what they had anticipated. Also at Haverhill, things like the cooler and freezer have been installed in the kitchen. Additional casework have been delivered and installed in the learning studios, and as well, the electrical work of piping, conduit, and pulling wires continue throughout the building. At the next board meeting, I would like to defer my report to a group of fourth graders at Haverhill. They had an opportunity to tour the school with us, not with the teachers, but with Dr. Jensenius and me, and they've put together a fascinating presentation that I think you'll enjoy at the upcoming board meeting. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have in terms of the construction.
The tour was so great.
Yes, thank you for
The
joining.
enthusiasm was amazing. It was just great job, great job.
And, right, Johnny, yeah, it was great. And then several of the teachers commented, you know, we just have to make it through June, and then we'll be in air conditioning. Like, yeah.
And
Plus,
that-
last week, that wasn't an issue.
Not an issue.
It's not an issue, it's only an issue for a little bit at the beginning and end of the school year, but people don't forget the hot days.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny. The third item, I've asked Tracy Speaker Gerstheimer to come up and just make a few clarifying comments about the presentation that we had at last meeting. There were some, I will call it unfortunate headlines, slant to the information that was presented that caused a lot of concern and kind of misrepresented the direction that we're headed in with these proposed changes. So I want to have Tracy just clarify that for our listeners and for the community and the board.
Absolutely. Good evening. Following our recent board meeting where we proposed curricular updates to our human growth and development curriculum, we have received inquiries from some families regarding the proposed sixth grade lesson on the harmful impacts of pornography. A poorly worded headline generated some significant attention, and it is clear from many of these inquiries that not all individuals fully read the article detailing the proposal. So I want to provide some clarity today. For years, our high school health teachers have included a lesson on the harmful impacts of pornography. However, student feedback consistently indicated that that information came way too late. Today's educational landscape has changed a great deal. Nearly all middle school students have personal cell phones, which can provide unrestricted internet access, making it very easy for a young student to unintentionally encounter inappropriate content. A 2023 study by Robin Mann states most kids today are exposed to porn by age 13, with 75% of males and 70% of females ages 13 through 17 having viewed porn. Furthermore, 53% of boys and 39% of girls believe that pornography is a realistic depiction of sex. Based on the student feedback we received, we collaborated with Chris McKenna, who's the founder of Protect Young Eyes, to develop an age-appropriate lesson for sixth graders. This was done in the spring of 2022. This lesson was designed to equip students with some knowledge and skills to respond appropriately when they encounter inappropriate content online. To be very clear, the lesson does not include or show pornography. Instead, it focuses on helping students understand that not everything they see online is real. It explains the link between pornography and violence against women and pornography and human trafficking, and it provides students with guidance on what they should do if they come across inappropriate content. The objective with our curriculum is to be proactive and try to safeguard students in a very complex digital world. Avoiding these topics can create confusion and shame, making it essential for trained educators to provide clear, factual guidance to help students navigate those digital spaces. We trust that our teachers will deliver that instruction effectively. We also respect that parents understand their children's needs best. And if this lesson is approved, as required by law with our human growth and development curriculum, parents will always have the option of reviewing the lesson with their child's teacher and then deciding if they would like to have their child opt out of the lesson. I want to remind you that it went through a very rigorous review process that took place over 2 years. This included multiple presentations to our Curriculum Instruction Council, as well as our Human Growth and Development Subcommittee, which is composed of parents, students, medical professionals, and clergy members. And then finally, we had 3 public hearings where we collected some feedback from parents and then made some adjustments to those plans. This was a very comprehensive process. We wanted to be sure that that lesson was developmentally appropriate, and we believe that students deserve accurate, age-appropriate information from a trusted and trained adult rather than relying on peers or the internet for guidance. I appreciate your listening and understanding and the comments from families as we work through this process. The input is valued and important as we work to deliver the best possible curriculum and education for our Portage students. Thank you.
Any questions from board members? This is on the consent agenda for approval, and so if there's any questions, now is a good time.
Well, I mean, just to say, when I saw the headline, just my heart sunk. And so this further emphasis and kind of getting us all grounded, really appreciate it.
Yes.
I will say, was a parent who was approaching 6th grade, that at first I was like, no. But I'm also realistic that not every other parent is as restrictive with online access as I am with my family. And knowing that that's out there, it's the best thing we can do for our children, all the children.
Thank you. I said it last meeting, but again, I really appreciate how you took the parent comments, because I saw some of that before and after, and I had concerns with consistency before, and that was cleared up from what I saw 2 weeks ago. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do so.
Thank you. Appreciate your feedback.
Thanks, Tracy, and thank you to your colleagues who also spent a good bit of time on this over the last couple of years.
Absolutely, I appreciate Annie and Emily 100%.
Thank you very much for your work. Appreciate it.
So the last thing I want to mention is last Friday we had a professional development day in the district, and where our teachers spent their day at the northern campus for the most part, engaged in a lot of activities. And planning for that is something that happens a long time in advance of that event, but it was a great day of activities. People were very engaged, hopefully learned something that they can take back in the classroom or do some self-reflection on. And so I want to thank all the participants, plus all of the folks who were involved behind the scenes in planning for a day. I mean, taking 500, 600 staff members and organizing it in a way that works for everybody and finding the spaces takes a lot of work. So a big appreciation to all those who were involved in the planning of that. That's all I have for updates.
Very good, sir. Thank you. We'll move to our comments and communications section. Does anyone wish to address the board this evening?
I have a couple of people.
Sarah Knott is our first speaker tonight. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, I am Sarah Knott. I'm the art teacher at Portage Northern. Oh my God, Mary Lou! Long time no see. one of two art teachers at Northern, and I'm here on behalf of the union tonight for your fun stories for the evening, giving Kat Frank a break from what I think has been many board meeting presentations. So I have some comments here that have been shared from union members throughout the district, stories that we're proud of, things that have been happening that have been enjoyable here. So from all over, 5 link leaders came in to do the icebreaker and present a lesson on stress management at the principals meeting on a student day off. So many thanks go out to link crew advisors from Portage Central, Nikki Smith, Ann Albertus, Adam Schwanzel, Rob Brown, and Shannon Skippers. Nobody needs stress relief more than principals. Recently, this one's from me. Recently, when talking to a couple of my IB students, it became clear to me that I had no idea this was going on. Jason Frank, the IB coordinator here, and I believe others in the IB program as well, have been working to get legislation pushed through that would force universities and colleges to more equally honor IB credits for college credits. So this would encourage universities that have sort of an upturned nose and, like our system, our way, our starting classes to be more equitable. And it sounds like it would also make it more equitable between SL level and HL level IB classes. So very cool. Even cooler too was the, this is a teenage girl. There was pride in her voice talking about legislation from one of her teachers. And those 3 things don't normally go in a sentence together. So it was very cool. Just this past week, actually on Friday, Katie Panish from Northern High School received the MEA's 2025 Human Rights Excellence Award for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for her work on the Free Store at Portage Northern. This is a really big award and something that the district can be very proud to be able to share about one of its staff members. Both the PEA and the MEA are grateful for all of the work that she's done at Northern, creating and supporting a system that has a positive impact on all of our students. Just this past week as well, the art show at the Portage District Library was uninstalled. This is all buildings who are able in the district, elementary through secondary, and just doing the math the other day, I realized that our first show was in 2016. So barring the COVID years, I think it was 2 years off, we've been doing this K-12 art exhibition at the district library for 8 years now. And it gets really excellent foot traffic. It's usually right around the holidays, gives families a chance to see the kind of their students' artwork highlighted a little bit, but also it's a lot less work for the art teachers than we're used to. The library really supports us and has started even asking for us to come back. So I don't even reach out to them anymore. They're like, hey, so you coming back? We're going to see you in January? And I'm like, yes, it's good. We also have a really long, an awesome report here from Amberley. Amberley is going strong with extra clubs that they offer outside of school hours. These include the Amberley Run Club, a dance club, ski and snowboarding club, and disc golf club. Amberley also had a huge turnout this year for their Battle of the Books teams, with many teachers and parents supporting that as well. The Amberley Run Club is offered in the fall for students 1st through 5th to practice their running skills after school for twice a week. They work on stretching, endurance, and perseverance. The Amberley Dance Club is twice a year for 3rd through 5th graders. Students practice multiple different styles of dance and then perform their dances for Amberley students and families. The Amberley Ski and Snowboarding Club is offered for all grade levels. They meet at Timber Ridge once a week during the winter months to practice their skills and confidence at skiing or snowboarding. The Disc Golf Club is offered twice a year for 4th and 5th graders to learn the sport. Amberley has a course set up at site for them to practice twice a week, and they have a tournament at the end. And Battle of the Books at Amberley is offered obviously with many different elementaries here in Portage, but they highlighted that staff and parents lead the team as each team reads 6 books and then has a friendly competition to see who can answer the most correct questions about those 6 books. All of these clubs take extra work and support from the Amberley staff to make them possible, and in the meantime, students are learning great new skills and talents that they can take with them for years to come. So nice little report from Amberley as well. And of course, I welcome questions. I don't know if you have questions about Battle of the Books. I'm a high school teacher. I don't know anything about it, but I'm here for you. Let me know. I thought I would end too with, so these are wonderful, positive, uplifting stories. I'll just give I think what a wonderful example of working with teenagers is like. So the other day, I teach visual art. I allow students to use their headphones to listen to music. That's my personal preference as a practicing artist as well. I listen to music while I create. I hear like a little tinny audio. Like I can hear maybe somebody turn their music on but forgot to put their headphones in. just enough time to look around and kind of say like, somebody maybe forgot something here. And then it stops. I'm like, oh, okay, we got it. Starts up again. Goes away again. Little repeats, like this. And I'm like, okay, this is unusual. So I start kind of walking around the room, looking from student to student. Come to a 15-year-old boy, got his earbuds stuffed up his nose. And every time he opens his mouth, it comes out. And every time he shuts his mouth, the music goes away. So there's the inside of teaching high school for a slice of life I thought I would offer for some levity. Thank you guys. Feel free to reach out at any time.
Remedy that situation.
I reached over and went like this. He didn't listen to music anymore then.
Thank you, Sarah.
Guys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Our next speaker is Dane Clark. Did I get that right?
Very close. It's Dagny.
Okay, Dagny Clark, thank you.
Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to say thank you to Tracy and her team. I think that when you're trying to impact positive change in a community, it can be a really big challenge, in trying to push a giant initiative through. And my typical thinking is when somebody's trying to make positive change in the community, it's usually for the better. And so, of course, my heart also sunk when I saw the headlines come through the various news outlets about pornography being taught to sixth graders. So what I tried to do is I was like, okay, I'm gonna really dig into this and research and understand where this is coming from and what is being proposed and how this lesson is gonna positively impact our kids. And so that was really my goal going into this, and as kind of like a discovery, like how does this all work? Like what's the change supposed to be? And what I found as I was trying to find that information is I felt like I was just hit with so many roadblocks in the pursuit of understanding what this curriculum change is about. I reviewed the human growth and development presentation from the April meeting in 2024, which I think was maybe the first time that it was the first time I found that it was mentioned in the meeting minutes for the curriculum instruction. And it referenced that, hey, there's more information in slides 7 through 16. But those slides 7 through 16, which had this additional information, were not published. So I submitted a request to get access to the slides, and that request was denied. Then I wanted to review the meeting minutes from the other meetings that were noted, because I think that, as Tracy said, that there were 3 additional public hearings. None of those public hearings, the meeting minutes, any agenda information, anything like that was available and accessible for parents in the community online. I called to ask where the meeting minutes were posted, because on Portage's website for the Curriculum and Instruction Council, the last meeting minute update had been June of 2024. And while there was a folder for meeting minutes for 24 to 25, that meeting folder was empty. And nothing was published. The most recent date that it showed online as far as when the next meeting is going to occur was also June of 2024. So I emailed questions. I called and I spoke with a very kind individual who said that she could answer all my questions. But at that time, I was trying to figure out what my questions really were, right? I just wanted to kind of see the presentation and understand what the information was. And so what I ended up doing is I sent an email with some basic questions that I'd run across, and she was very responsive very quickly and said, hey, I forwarded your email to the committee who will be able to answer these questions in more detail, and I have not yet received a response. So Tracy actually answered 2 of the questions that I had in the email when she came up here today to speak, but like my goal in this is I'm not really looking to be reassured by a committee that, hey, no, everything is fine, trust us, we've done all of this research. I would like to actually see the information for myself and then make my own decision and then decide if I want to come up here and say, hey, I think this is an amazing way to go, well, in which case you probably won't have to see me again. Or if I have to come up here and say, hey, wait, have we considered this? Will parents have the ability to see this curriculum in advance? are we gonna, part of it is also if your kid is maybe not at that developmental level, but they're gonna be included in this presentation, as a parent, you may want an opportunity to have a base level discussion with them before they walk into a situation like this. And so all of those things and that information that I'm sure is very well thought out, and it sounds like a lot of efforts were made to try to get parent feedback and understand how that's all gonna go, but that's not accessible right now at all. So I don't know if I have comments because the information isn't there. And I don't know if I think that this is a great way for Portage schools to go, which I love Portage. I'm heavily involved in the, in the school itself. But I can't find the information to determine if I have a comment or if I can then say, yes, we've done another great thing as a district. And so I guess what I'd be looking, my request is that I would ask that the council hold off on this vote to see if it gets put into the curriculum until that information is made accessible to parents, concerned parents online. My request is not necessarily, it's not out of line. It does state in the Open Meetings Act of 1976, PA 267, and I can read MLC 15.261. It does say that these meeting minutes and agendas should be posted online for state government in advance. The meeting minutes should be approved and posted well within the time frame that they have been. Keep in mind, we're talking about meetings from June 2024 was the last update. The meetings minutes from September of 2024 were just posted on Friday after I called. And even in those meeting minutes, they weren't comprehensive. So they didn't tell me any information about what the proposed changes are or what we should be expecting as parents. And so I guess that would be my ask out of this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Okay, are there any comments by board trustees this evening?
Well, Harry Potter was outstanding. If you haven't seen it, you go. It will knock your socks off as usual for usual Portage Central. So very cool, very cool.
I would, Randy, I'll just say I will once again thank my colleagues for the extra time and the retreat. And yes, important stuff, maybe a little boring, and we did spend some time arguing over the meaning of a word, but time well spent because it's a really important word, so thank you all.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll move to our consent agenda, which is on page 23. And we have meeting minutes and the HGD curricular changes, approval of board meeting minutes from January 27th, 2025 policy governance retreat and regular meeting, and the February 4th, 2025 special meeting, and then that the Board of Education approve the changes to the human growth and development curriculum at Portage Public Schools as presented. Does anybody wish to take anything off the consent agenda this evening?
Mr. President, I want to ask a quick question of the superintendent. Mark, is there any chance that we're not in compliant with the postings? I'm asking to be careful about this.
I'm not familiar with all the details to be able to answer that. I have no reason to believe that we have not been, but I heard the speaker like you did. So I can't answer your question.
This is in referral to the CIC, the Curriculum Instruction Committee meetings, or?
I don't know what minutes are being referred to.
Okay, because I did look at the current year past, and a couple months ago, and did not see any current postings in there, but I didn't know if that's because there weren't meetings or because they weren't posted. I don't know.
September is posted. The meeting in October was canceled. and we didn't have a meeting in November or December. So the most recent CIC meeting was about 2 weeks ago, maybe, a virtual meeting, very short, to just talk about some, I don't know what you, yeah. So, that's all there is. So the only one missing was September, and it is posted as the speaker mentioned, but it was just posted.
Okay.
I will not object.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, very good. The consent agenda is therefore approved as presented. And we'll now move to page 33, which is assurance of district performance. We have a monitoring report, 1.5. There's a motion on page 33, please.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education accept monitoring report 1.5 ends as a reasonable interpretation and evidence of compliance with policy.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you.
So this is one of the standard monitoring reports that comes across on the ends. This is monitoring report 1.5. And basically, the information has been unchanged other than some of the data that we present. The interpretations are all the same. This report really speaks to the board's desire that our students behave ethically, that they have respect for individual differences, and also respect for cultures other than their own. So the report is presented in those 3 sections. The one section on student behavior is probably a little more quantifiable than the others. So I'm gonna let Dr. Pasco just share some of the information that we look at around ethical behavior. We do not have benchmarks for what our expectations are. But we like to see what the trends of our students and what they're doing, and I think this will show some of the data that we collect locally, and that's also available through some of the reporting sites that we get our information and share information with. So, Dr. P.
All right. Yeah, good evening, Superintendent Beelang and trustees. Like Mark said, tonight I'll present the data connected to the ethical behavior portion of MR 1.5. So we'll look at attendance in the packet, look at some data on violent crime, bullying, expulsion, illegal substance possession, and theft. So we'll just highlight some of the tables and charts that are in your packet. Might not show up as great on the slide deck, but you have them in your monitoring report. So the first one's chronically absent. Students considered chronically absent when he or she has missed 10% or more of the possible school days during the scheduled school year. This data is directly pulled from my school data. So PPS chronically absent data has steadily declined, down to 16.5% in 2024. That's a change from a high of 26.2% during the COVID years. So we've had 2 consecutive school years showing a declining trend, but again, like a lot of our data, we're still not back to the pre-pandemic numbers, but you can kind of see where we fall as of the last year. Looking at attendance, so this is the average daily attendance rate for all students K-12. Again, this is coming directly out of my school data. So PPS attendance has increased to 93.72% in 2024 from a low of 88.82% during COVID. Again, 2 consecutive school years of data trending in the right direction. We're trying to get back to kind of that 95% mark, as you see, kind of on average there, the previous years prior to COVID that we've seen in the past. But we're trending in the right direction there in terms of attendance. Victims of violent crime. So this data tracks the number of students who have been victims of violent criminal offenses on school property or at a school-sponsored event. So these are official written complaints that either get submitted to our administration or our SROs or to school officials. And again, this gets reported to my school data as well. So we've typically had a very low number of students, less than 0.5%, who have been victims of violent crime. So in 2024, PPS had 0.14% of students that were victims of violent crime, so that was 12 students. And that's down from 0.16%, 14 students in 2023. So these would be sexual assaults or physical attacks that would get reported, as an example. Bullying data, so this encompasses written, verbal, or physical acts or any electronic communication, such as like cyberbullying that's intended or that a reasonable person would know is likely to cause harm to one or more pupils, either directly or indirectly. So we've always had less than 2% of students with bullying offenses. We did have an increase in bullying to 1.48%, so that was 129 students reported in 2024 from 0.86%, which was 74 students in 2023. We continue to work with our building leaders to ensure we're consistent with offense codes. We've done a lot of work through Skyward to make sure that we're consistent across the board, and we've mentioned that in previous reports in terms of how they're interpreting the handbook. So we may see just an improvement of accuracy in terms of how the appropriate labels are put on the acts of misconduct. So it could contribute to the slight increase, but that was the last 2 years of comparison. Expulsions, so total expulsions, that represents the number of students who have been expelled from school 180 days or more. Again, this is all data from my school data. We take every effort to look at restorative practices and long-term suspension rather than expel students. PPS expelled 1 student in 2024. That's down from 3 students in 2023. So Barb and I work closely on overseeing the due process hearings in the district. And we rarely see offenses that would lead us to a potential decision of recommending expulsion to Superintendent Beelang for a student. Those would be things like dangerous weapons, arson, criminal sexual conduct, or bomb threats or threats of terrorism. And again, rarely in the 8 years that Barb and I have been working together with the due process hearings, we rarely see kids cross that threshold. So that's why you see such a low number of expulsions in PPS. Illegal substance possession, that's the distribution, possession, or use of illegal drugs, or the inappropriate distribution, possession, or use of prescription drugs on school property or at a school-sponsored event. The source is National Center for Education Statistics, that's NCES for the state, or for the nation, and then Skyward is our PPS data in blue. Again, we've had typically a very low number of students, less than 1% with legal possession. So in 2024, we had 0.47%, that was 41 students. That was down from 0.73, 63 students in 2023. And these reports were based on collected data from public school principals based off of their response on a questionnaire. So one had got sent out electronically, and then later down the collection window, they sent schools a paper form as well. So this represented, I believe, 4,800 U.S. public schools. That was conducted, again, through an online questionnaire and a paper form. So these reports were published every 2 years. You can see from 16 to 2022. And then that ended in 22, so we won't have any further data to collect. I believe the NCES has stopped collecting that, but you can kind of see from what data we do have the comparison there. So again, pretty low numbers for the size of the district. And then lastly, an incident of theft is one that occurs on school property or a school-sponsored event. That's taking items worth over $10 without personal confrontation. Again, that's coming from NCES for the national stats and our own data for PPS and Skyward. Again, we've had typically very low numbers, less than 0.5% committing theft in the district. In 2024, we had 0.31%, that was 27 students. That was up from 0.24%, 21 students in 2023. So that's kind of a summary of the data that you have in your packet. And Mr. Galen's also here to join me. He's going to present a little bit more on the staffing piece of this report.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
So, are there any things that you can point to that would say, like in 2021, there were 6 thefts, and in 2024, there are 27? That even though 27 isn't a big number, it's a significant increase. Or the same on illegal possession. If you go back to 2021, it like skyrocketed and now is coming down. But are there things you can point to that would say this is why this is happening, or it's random, or you don't know?
I mean, we witnessed the spike in illegal substance possession firsthand coming out of COVID.
Yep.
You know, we work closely, obviously, with our SROs of the Portage Public Safety Department. I think a part of that is just the availability of what's out there with the shops within the community. And I know that the Portage Public Safety Department is monitoring, you know, those businesses to make sure that they're being sold to the appropriate people and not being passed into our community and into our schools. So I think, without a doubt, that's contributed, just the availability for the illegal substance possession. I have to ask our administrative team around the theft piece to see, you know, why we saw, even though it's a small number, it's still a spike.
It is.
You know, it's an increase. I don't have an answer personally. I'd have to kind of connect with the administrative team to see if they've seen anything in particular, or maybe it's, you know, is there a specific item that folks, you know, wanted to, you know, take from someone else. I haven't dug into that to point a finger, but the illegal substance possession, that's something that Barb and I have seen in the due process hearings coming out of COVID, and I'm glad to actually see that come down, because I was quite concerned there for a couple years. But knowing that that's, you know, trending down, that's a good sign.
So my other question is about chronically absent. So what do you do with these chronically absent people? I know that emails are sent, I know paper letters are sent, but in cases that I am personally aware of, the parents don't read those and they could give a rip if their kid is in school. So what do we do? I was working with a student last year that missed 50 days of school in one semester. And so how are we being proactive to address that?
I know the building level teams, including counselors and school psychs, engagement specialists at elementary, I know they try to work directly with the family to make that connection and bridge the gap between school and home, and really figure out what's going on with that student, what's going on with that family. As we all know, that we have a lot of wonderful resources in Portage Public Schools, so it's a matter of finding out what do they need that we can provide to help put them in a better spot. Proactively, this Wednesday, we have all of our assistant principals. Our meeting is going to be over at K-RISA. We're going to be listening to a truancy and attendance presentation from Paul Holbrook, who's an education consultant. So they're going to get that information. He's also going to talk about strategies to address exactly what you just talked about, Terry. Then we're going to have that same individual come in on February 20th in this room here as we have our principals meeting, and they'll get that intimate presentation right here, and we'll be able to kind of talk about our own data and learn from, you know, some folks at K-RISA to see what are the strategies amongst the county that we can apply to those situations, particularly the chronic absenteeism, because like you said, 50 days in one semester is significant in terms of loss of instructional time and how that plays into MR11 in our student achievement. So,
Sure. And we know that studies will show that kids who are in school perform. If they're out of school, they don't.
so I know we've got some strategies going on, but we need to continue to learn more. So hopefully over this next couple weeks, we'll walk away from the presentations with a couple more tools that we can apply to help get that number down.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks for the questions. Kimberly?
Can you remind me real quick, approximately, not necessarily exact, approximately how many days would a student need to be absent to be considered chronically absent? You said about 10%.
So that's 18.
Yeah, 18,
That's what I was
180
thinking.
days, yeah. So they can hit it, you know,
Oh, yeah.
relatively quick, you know, depending on what's happening.
That's
you know,
9
on
a
the home
semester.
front or anything that's impacting the family. So important to keep that connection to home and school, to really understand what's going on with, you know, each of our students and how we can best support, you know, the family as a whole.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, Mr. Gillen.
And before Brad, no, go ahead, Michael, that's, you're all set. No, I just, before Brad makes his comments, because the chart that shows the staffing and the students is really not part of the report. It's added on as informational item. But I do want to mention that regarding the other two areas that we report on, which is we don't measure, is respect for people, or for individuals and for cultures other than their own. We do a lot of work through our clubs, getting students into spaces where they can have conversations with those who are different than they are. in any number of different ways. I know that our media specialists, our librarians work hard to have a collection in their libraries of materials that expose students to other cultures. And many of our schools host activities. So in the report are some of those things that we focus on. It's by no means an exhaustive list, but an example of some of the things happening. I know that there are new things developing. There are some things happening at West Middle School with some mentoring programs, bringing in individuals. Johnny Edwards is involved with an initiative at Northern High School with supporting our young people, getting them to see and hear success stories from individuals who may not be thought of as successful by many of our students. So we just try to expose our students to as much as possible, including trying to work towards having a workforce that represents our student body, which is a huge task. And I guess that's where the segue to Brad is about some of that information that you have here.
Yeah, so actually, page 46 in your board packet actually has the graphs and this information here that we're talking about. But just to emphasize the importance of some of our ongoing programs, such as our Grow Our Own program and those types of activities, where we're really trying to diversify our faculty and our staff to make it more reflective of our student body. This is not an overnight project. So I hire anywhere from 20 to 35 teachers a year out of 500 plus teachers a year. So it takes a long time to be able to kind of steer that ship, but it is something that we are very conscious of, but also making sure, because we want the best, we want people who are well certified, well experienced in their fields, and that's something that we look at. And I think, as we all know, and all of us who have had kids go through the system, we're very good at doing that as well. But this is something that we constantly look at. So, but comparing over the last 2 years, I mean, we have managed to again shift in a positive direction. So our student body, of course, is and I don't have the student numbers right here in front of me, but about 77% white, whereas our staff right now is 92.4% white. So again, we're still not as reflective with the student body as we are, or reflective in the staff as we are with the student body, but it is something that we are looking at constantly and making small steps along the way as we keep going. So that's why we feel like this information, while not part of 1.5, is still important information for you as a board to have, and we update it each year. So I work with Melissa O'Keefe in our curriculum instruction office. She is able to track the student numbers, and then we're actually required every other year to submit our data for staff to the federal government. So that happens. It did not happen this year, so it'll be next year. And they look at it at a snapshot in time. So basically the first payroll in October, I take a snapshot and they look at not only what overall we do, but also what our new hires, so anyone hired from July 1st to September 30, look at as well. So that's a report that we run every other year through our system, and it gets filed on what's called the EEO5, which is one of the other fun little forms that me and my team get to do, get that filed on an ongoing basis. So it's something that we look at constantly. And sometimes I have to try to cheat with the EEO5 to get it to run in the off years like this year, because it only opens up every other year. So I have to try to manually manipulate that data to get the numbers here for you.
So thank you, Brad. And Brad didn't mention it, but kudos to his department for really jumping on the Grow Your Own program. And I know we've identified and self-identified some folks that that are interested in teaching, becoming teachers. So we really are working hard on that, and as well as trying to find ways to encourage people to go into the field of education. I mean, that's the universities are still challenged with producing enough teachers, especially teachers of color. So that's something we're trying to to at least impact on a local basis through the Grow Your Own programs. Any questions?
Mark, I just want to say thank you for taking a little time out and giving us a little extra background on those two graphs. It's important. I know, yeah, it's hard work. appreciate you just letting us know that it's important and you're working on it. And, I mean, I look at the number, and I think when I started on the board, it was like 96 or 97%. So, I mean, it's moving.
Actually, I went back and looked at the first time I put the data together was in 2015, and it was 97.1%.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Brad.
Any other comments or questions about the monitoring report? All those in favor of approving monitoring report 1.5, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. The monitoring report's approved. Thank you, Mark, for a good report.
You're welcome.
Our next monitoring report is on page 48. Monitoring report 2.4, financial planning and budgeting. Is there a motion, please?
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education accept monitoring report 2.4, financial planning budgeting, as a reasonable interpretation and evidence of compliance with policy.
Thank you, Emily. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Terry. Mark?
This is a much shorter report, and again, an annual report that basically deals with three issues. One is making sure that the end-of-the-year fund balance is above 7%, that we're not borrowing money to meet our payroll obligations, and that we have cash flow in place to meet payroll and vendor obligations. So this is an assurance of the different ways that we do that. Our fund balance that the board approved in June anticipates that we'll have an end-of-the-year unassigned fund balance of 12.44%, which is well above that 7% mark. And you'll get an update on that as we do budget revisions and planning for that as well. But based on what I know right now, it's not going to deviate very much from what we have there. And the only other thing that I point out is you're asking us not to budget any less for board prerogatives that you did last year into this year. Things such as paying for the audit, your professional development through the different workshops that are available to you, owner linkage activities, board development like we did earlier through Gary, and work we do at retreats. Legal expenses are all budgeted in there so that we make sure that those costs are covered. So. And anything else that might come along, like your superintendent search process will cost a little bit, that we're making adjustments in a budget for that as well.
You made sure that was in there.
I did. Didn't want to give any wrong impressions. So, happy to answer any questions on that report, but again, a very basic report provided annually, and hopefully that makes some sense to our newest board members.
Any questions for Mark? Here's the organization met expectations. All those in favor of approving monitoring report 2.4, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. The monitoring report is approved. And now we're moving to our first action item on page 55 to approve the changes to district graphics, tagline, and vision statement. Is there a motion, please?
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education approve changes to the district graphics, tagline, and vision statement as presented.
Thank you, Mark. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion, any comments?
Well, I tried to capture as much as I could in the memo to you, in the cover memo, that this has been really a lengthy process that was spurred by in part by the communications audit that we entered into a couple of years ago. And one of those recommendations is that we take a look at our branding, how we come across, reestablish some focus so that people know as much from the district, from our graphics and from our vision statement and that. So I think we've been bringing the board members along since last fall with some of the work that has been going, and it seems to have been well received. The only piece that we didn't spend a lot of time on is the merging of the two statements that exist. The vision statement that has been around for some time, that was developed kind of in the early years when I got here between the board and administration, and then the more recent aspirational statement that was put together by our district values team with a lot of input from students and staff and from the community. So those two statements, even though they read somewhat differently, I think have much the similar intent behind it. And through our audit and through the work we were doing with rebranding, it seemed like there was some confusion as to what is what. And so the recommendation was made that we look at combining those two into one statement. And so I've provided in the memo what we had, what we in both of those, and what it looks like as a merged statement. And you'll see there's very little difference by adopting the aspirational statement for the most part. And then the biggest change, the biggest visible change, is the tagline, moving from the future learns here to every student, every future, which is incorporated in the new vision statement and will be the tagline as was presented by Michelle and Rick Chambers at the last meeting. So we're excited about this. Our goal is to begin the preparation work so that we can roll this out for next fall for the start of the school year. So some of that will be happening this summer yet. We don't see it as any kind of a financial impact for the district. The only signage that we have is the signage that's on our building at the administration building, and there's really no plans to change that. It doesn't contain a tagline. It just has Portage Public Schools. So there's no we're not in a hurry to change anything, if at all. And everything else that we would be using this on is pretty much electronic, and so it's just a matter of changing changing what we have. We will be developing style guides and everything that goes with it so that we're consistent in how we apply this across the district. So I think some neat changes, and we're looking forward to incorporating this in our communications. Questions?
Are my colleagues comfortable with approving the vision statement?
I was going to ask the same question.
I just have to admit this got by me. And I thought we were approving the graphics, and so that's where my brain went. But we are approving a vision statement, which is a pretty big deal. And we really haven't talked about it as a board.
Right.
So I'm trying to process it really quickly. My preference would be to process it slowly. But I don't want to be the skunk at the garden party, because my big thing is that the word exceptional is in there, that says, you know, we have high expectations here. So with that word in there, I'm okay. But I'm just checking with my colleagues to see if you are okay too. I wouldn't blame it if somebody said, hey, let's just all give this a little more review time from a trustee perspective.
I would like some more review time. The word that I was like, why isn't that still in there, was the word learning.
Learning is there.
Not in,
We've got lifelong learning.
Lifelong learning.
not in the lifelong learning.
Yeah.
But I was like, so.
Yeah, the word exceptional is the word that was really kept from the original vision statement and incorporated into the work of the district values team. But I guess of all of the pieces, this is probably the one that could be held off on the longest. It does reside outside of the governance policies. I remember when Gary does the presentation around policy governance, he makes a point of saying mission and vision reside outside of that. So, but I certainly understand with the board's involvement in the previous statement that you may want some more time on it. I don't think there's anything critical with that that needs to be approved this evening. We would like the remaining pieces of that approved if you would consider that, if you still have hesitancy on this vision.
I am 100% comfortable with everything else if we want to discuss the vision statement as a whole board. let's go ahead and approve everything else.
Is that the way everybody is leaning?
Yeah, and
I just want to ask, Michelle, is there any reason why I'm not sure what work that you're planning coming up. Is there any reason why?
No, I think as
Holding
long
off on
as
it.
we, I'd love to have it in place before summer so that we could, because it is in our, of course, it's on the website, we'll be changing the graphics for the district extra and it's always on there. So, those places, we don't put it on our letterhead or anything like that. So we certainly could move forward with the work, switching things over without it. But also, the big posters we have up in all the schools, we'll ultimately redo those and everything. So we'll definitely want to have it, but it wouldn't be critical to do it tonight. But the other stuff would be nice to be able to get going on, because we do have, the branding guides and all those things we're close on those, but, we have some final tweaks based on, what happens here.
Okay, so we want more time on this?
yeah, if any of my colleagues feel that way, I can certainly go there. I see nothing.
There's nothing egregious.
Yeah, and I would not invite my colleagues to wordsmith, frankly, including me. It's just a process of, this statement comes at the top of the pyramid, and we hang out at the top of the pyramid, and.
Yeah, so the only thing I would say is that we did receive a lot of input into the aspirational statement as it was, developed in terms of, students were polled, staff members were polled, the community, parents all provided input. And then when Rick was looking at the different documents, he took a stab at how these statements might look. So we had several different variations to work off of, and in that process, that was all merged into something that, at least from my perspective, maintains the same type of, level of vision that the board had before. So I just say that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I would say I would be more comfortable just excluding it tonight, giving me a chance to compare it to the old one, and just, and I will not wordsmith a word. It would discourage my colleagues.
Okay, who made that motion?
We can move
Can't
forward.
remember.
That's a good thing.
Oh, did you make the motion to?
I did.
No,
Oh,
Mark
Mark did, yeah. Could you withdraw the motion?
I withdraw the motion to approve the changes to the district graphics. No, just the vision statement. Withdraw the approval to the vision statement as presented, but approve graphics and tagline.
So you just want to amend your motion,
Amend my
the
motion.
original motion to exclude vision statement from the motion. And
Is
then
there-
and then Emily.
Second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the new motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is approved. And we'll now move to our first discussion item, which is the 24-25 budget amendments. Welcome Paula, welcome Sammy.
Good evening, Board of Ed and Superintendent Beeling. Tonight, myself and Sammy Stevens will present to you the highlights from the First Amendment to the General Fund for the 24-25 school year. I just want to take the board back to last June of 2024, because not everybody in this room was here at our budget hearing that we had last June. So I always like to start to bring you back to where the preliminary budget started and the assumptions that we took into play, so that you can see where we went from preliminary to the amendment. So in June, we have to make assumptions because the legislatures haven't passed their state aid package, but we're required by law to pass our preliminary budget by the end of June, so assumptions are made. I made an assumption that we would build our budget on a $217 foundation allowance increase. So we were budgeting at $9,825 per student. We also are paid through state aid based on our enrollment. So I looked at our enrollment data and budgeted down 96 students at that time because our preliminary enrollment was looking low. And as we met on the 24th, the expenditure number that I brought to the board that night showed expenditures exceeding revenues by the amount of $2,312,354. A lot of things are unknown at the time that a preliminary budget is put into place, and that's why we amend twice through the year. We had unsettled contracts with our PEA group, the Education Office Personnel Group, and with our bus drivers. And at the time that I put together the preliminary budget, we left the retirement rate unchanged, but there's more to come on that topic as we get into the presentation. So 3 days later, after pulling an all-night session, the legislators passed their state aid package, and it was unlike anything that I've ever seen before. They did not give us a foundation increase. They are still funded at the same level that we received for 23-24, so we need to keep that in mind for the next year's budget, because they have 2 years to catch us up for. But they spent a lot of time in the retirement area. They made a lot of changes, and rather not to bore everyone, just know that a lot of the changes happened in the retirement area, and we're reflecting it in the budget, such as the UAAL rate piece of retirement was reduced. So that's both a revenue and an expenditure that runs through our budget. It has a net effect of 0 on the bottom line, but it's something that the state gives us in our state aid payment, and we turn around and pay it back to them. They gave us, in lieu of the foundation increase, a new categorical called 147A4. Excuse me, yep, 147A4, in lieu of the foundation increase, and they called it a MIPSR's cost offset. So we're receiving money on a categorical on our state aid status report instead of an increase in our foundation allowance. Very interesting. But a couple good things did happen through this package. They continued the 22L district transportation cost. They continued the enrollment stabilization funding, which reimburses districts for a portion of their lost enrollment year over year, because a lot of districts are seeing declining enrollment across the state. And they continued the free breakfast and lunch offerings, which I feel is a huge benefit to our students. One thing that wasn't so great in the first outcome was the 31AA funding, that's also known as the mental health and safety categorical. That was slashed by 91% in the preliminary budget. Then the legislatures came along later in the fall, early winter, and they passed a supplemental package to give us additional 31AA funding, but they didn't make it immediate effect, so we're not going to see that increase until probably March. And it's still a significantly less dollar amount than what we received for 23-24, but at least there's some funding there. So I just want to take a moment to show the board that this is a history of our blended enrollment. This is what comes through on our state aid status reports that we are paid on from Michigan Department of Ed. It's a combination of 10% of the spring count and 90% of the corresponding fall count. And they cross fiscal years, so it's 10% of February 24's count date and 90% of October 2024's count date. And these are our actual numbers, where we actually landed after our October count day. Even though I had budgeted to be down the 96 students, we ended up being down about 9 students. So I was way off on my enrollment number, but I only could use the data that I had at the time to build the budget. And we saw a spike in enrollment in like the kindergarten area. Those numbers were low at the time of the preliminary budget, but they put some changes in effect for what parents had to do in order for their children to be able to enroll in kindergarten. So it took longer for those steps to happen for us to reflect that in our enrollment numbers. So, but you can notice that our enrollment still has not come back to where we were at pre-pandemic level. So, to touch on the highlights of what we actually did in this First Amendment, Sammy and I are going to go over the revenues and expenditures with you and show you at the end, you know, where we end up overall. But basically, we combed through everything in the budget to do this amendment. So, obviously, I'm gonna adjust our revenues based on our actual enrollment, and I did that. I adjusted our property tax revenue based on changes in taxable value, but keep in mind, any local money that we collect through property tax revenue, the state takes that off on their side when they pay us our state aid payment. So just because our property tax revenue goes up, it just means the state has to give us less money. I adjusted everything that changed with the retirement, with the UAAL, with the creation of the new categorical. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in future budgets. I also updated our special education categorical 51C. That one lags a few months. That's actually last year's 23-24 adjustment where the state makes us whole on their portion of what they're required to pay us for special education costs. And so I factor that in. We usually don't see that until the February state aid payment, but I made the calculation and put it into the amendment now, so because it was significant enough.
So also for revenues, we looked at all the federal awards and we made those actual, so that includes our title grants. Those were updated to our 2024-25 award amounts plus the carryover from 23-24. We're allowed to carry over the funds that we don't use, which is very fortunate. Also updated all the COVID-19 funding, which sunsetted on 9/30/24. That has been a big project for us as a district, as you all know, with all of that money that has come through. But there are only 3 sources remaining as of 9/30, and that was ESSER 3, 11T, and the American Rescue Plan Act McKinney-Vento funding, which helped our McKinney-Vento students. And we were fortunate enough to be able to spend all of that money in full as a district. A lot of it we used to be able to legally supplant the general fund to create the committed fundings that we talk about in our allocated fund balance. We also made adjustments to the KRESA millages that the district receives. The first one is that special education millage. There was a slight decrease to that, but that's due to us receiving more money from the state. So KRESA's millage and the state special education funding, they work hand in hand. KRESA goes down, the state goes up, and vice versa. We also adjusted the enhancement millage that we received from KRESA. There was a slight increase in that, and that's due to the enrollment being up from what we adopted at. So the next one is just a visual of your revenues, and just to kind of touch on these major points. So the local sources, that's up about 1.7% from your preliminary budget. A lot of that's due to the property taxes, which is 57% of that local revenue. And the other big piece is those 2 millages that we received from KRESA. State sources is down a little bit from your preliminary budget. It's down by 1.75%. As Paula has mentioned, at preliminary budget, we had adopted that increase in foundation allowance, but we didn't end up getting it, which was very odd, and I would have to agree with Paula, and I hope that's the only time that I ever see that in my career. But we also saw, in retrospect, we saw decreases in our normal retirement categories, along with the addition of the new one, the 147A4, to replace not receiving a foundation allowance increase. We also made adjustments to the other state categoricals such as 31AA and the 22L district transportation. Federal sources again includes the title grants and COVID funding that has now sunsetted and is done. Title funding is approximately 60% of that current federal funding, so next year at this time, that federal sources will be a little bit less, not a whole lot. I did the math. It's about $600,000 of that was the COVID funding in that federal sources. And then those incoming transfers, that $142,000, that's our food group indirect, and then sale of school property, which we sold some school buses and some other items from maintenance that relates to that revenue. Moving on to expenses, we spend a lot of time in the expense area and the revenue, but the expense area is, I mean, huge for our district. So there's over 6,000 accounts that we look at individually, almost each budget amendment. So we analyze each salary account, which then comes in and we analyze the benefit accounts as well. When you have just over 600 accounts and then you add benefit accounts to every single one of those, that makes for a lot of accounts and a lot of numbers. We adjusted that UAL rate, and we also adjusted the contract settlements for all those open groups that Paula had mentioned. We made insurance rates to actual. When we adopt that preliminary budget, there's a lot of unknowns, the insurance rates for January through June being one of them, and we were able to adjust those to actual. We also sit with all the departments and talk about how things are going, where expenses are down, where we need to add some more money, and we make those adjustments. We've updated the state and federal categorical expenses, and that includes the addition of 147C2, which for those of you that were on the board a couple of years ago, that was supposed to be a one-time funding in 22-23, but they conveniently reintroduced that this year. So there's not going to be a big sway in the retirement like we had seen that year, but it's going to help kind of make retirement look, I want to say, more normal with that drop. And then we had the intentional addition of the purchase of a zero-turn lawnmower and 3 vans, which will be brought to you later this evening for discussion. And that's to help bring down the surplus of the fund balance at 6:30. The next one is a visual representation very similar to the one of the revenues. This is broken out by object code, and it is the visual representation of the major categories page in your packet. Salaries and benefits is down from the preliminary budget. A lot of that is due to that drop in retirement. While it is an in and an out, it still affects our expenses. And we also adopted our fringe benefits at a higher rate than what actually came in. So we made those actual, as I had mentioned. Purchase services, that's up from preliminary. A lot of that is due to an increase in counseling costs that's funded by 31N6. So we bring in third-party counselors to work with our students. Janine, the ESI department, handles that and is doing a phenomenal job at getting our students the services that they need. That purchase service also includes subbing costs. Like we had mentioned, it's really hard at the beginning of the year to really grasp what's going to happen. So right now is the time that we kind of look at our subbing costs and kind of be able to gauge where we're headed in the year for that. Supplies and materials, that's up as well. When we're looking at it, that's primarily because of grant funding that we're receiving, mainly from the state. 35J was one that we received, and that was for PD curriculum and supplies, and we purchased some novels out of that. We purchased calculators from 11T, and we made adjustments to building supply budgets that included their adjustment due to their fall enrollment as well as their carryover from the previous year because of SOAR. The next one breaks it down by function code, which is page 1 of your monthly board report. This one is very similar to a report that's created by MDE with our FID data. The FID is a report that for our new board members, the FID is a report that we have to submit November 1st of every year after our audit is complete for the MDE to just make sure that everything is in line with the district. As you can see, instructional services is our biggest chunk. That's $73 million of our budget. And these are expenses directly related to the school, so elementary school, middles, highs. At-risk and special education costs are also in there, along with Title I expenses. The pupil support section is our next largest, and that's $11.2 million. This includes expenses like our school psychs, our guidance counselors, engagement specialists, PT and OT expenses, speech path costs, HAL monitors, lunch, playground, so those who really work with the students. And then the next largest piece would be our operations and maintenance, which is $10.7 million. And that's, our electric, our water, our sewage, heating costs, custodial, snow removal, technology to repair costs fall in that area. And it also includes expenses like our SROs. This next slide takes into consideration our actual ending results from the 23-24 school year. The monitoring report that Mark brought you tonight took an estimate of the percentage of unassigned fund balance that he had, because at that point in time, it's not an actual number, because he's asking at the time that we adopted the preliminary budget. So when we actually closed out the year last summer, revenues did exceed expenditures, but included in that excess amount were committed funds that the district set aside for before and after school funding. And the end result was total unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures was 17.39%, which is well above the required 7% that the board has set. The amendment that we're bringing you this evening still shows an excess of expenditures over revenues slightly higher than the preliminary budget, but I want to point out a couple things that are happening on that expenditure side. Included in that expenditure number is approximately $564,000 of committed related expenditures. That piece of those expenditures have their own fund balance that they're taken from. And then just under $300,000 of one-time capital outlay that we are implementing through the budget for the vans and the zero-turn lawnmower. So tonight, taking into account if every revenue dollar is received and every expenditure dollar is spent, which we will still amend this again in June, and then we'll wait to see what actually comes in at final. Projected unassigned fund balance is set at 15.53%. And this is an estimate. It's purely an estimate. We have a final number at the time that we close the books in June of this year, over the summer. So it's customary for me to share this information with the board so that you can see what happens to the unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. Here is, in case you're a visual person, for the graph, you can see the history of actual unassigned fund balance percentages as reflected here, and then the estimate of what the unassigned fund balance would be based on the amendment tonight in your board packet that we're asking you to approve in 2 weeks. And with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
I think you did too good a job. I don't know if anybody has a question.
As always, I appreciate your attention to detail with this.
Paula, I'm vaguely remembering, it might have been last spring or the spring before, but you had said that the fund balance was going to maybe go through a kind of a natural cycle where it was going to come back down up again. And is that maybe kind of what we're seeing? No, we're still way above 7, so it's like, well, good there. But is that just kind of like where you could see where our spending was going to go? And
we're intentionally trying to do that, and we also keep in mind we did not, with all those federal one-time funds, we didn't put long-term costs in there, so that other districts were experiencing funding cliffs for doing that, and we did not do that here. So our intentional use of those funds has also caused us to put other funds in place to help the students longer than the duration of what we could have used the federal funds for. So, but yes, we are working towards trying to level out that for fund balance percentage.
Well, I remember, chatting with my colleagues here, and we were all very aware of what happened in Ann Arbor. And they got out and they made long-term commitments on one-time funding, and it took a year or two and they hit the cliff, and it was painful. So appreciate the stewardship that you all have shown.
Paul has done, and Sammy have done an excellent job in trying to right-size everything so that we're not putting money into fund balance that, that we could be spending on students. And so we're kind of doing a mid-course adjustment here, try to make that happen, so.
So then I have one more technical question. so last year's increase, right, it wasn't in the foundation allowance, it was helping us out with our expenses on retirement. Did you ever take what we saved on retirement and divide it by pupil and just try to convert that?
You want to know what our actual
I would love to know where that came out, because
I happen to have calculated that number.
I bet you that was the first thing you did. Was it like 2-3%, or was it?
It was approximately $360, $359 per pupil is what it's showing when I take the categorical divided by the blended enrollment. So it was actually higher than what I had built the preliminary on. But then keep in mind, they take away money in other places too. And I think it's going to get very, very creative when I read the executive budget that the governor put out and how things are going to shift around. And yeah, it's going to be, stay tuned. It's about to get real fun.
Yeah, that had a generous percentage, but I think a number of those expenditures weren't necessarily going to land with us. Right, so, we will see. We will wait, and that's May and June.
Yeah, well, basically, the money we got there wasn't baked into the foundation allowance, which is, would have created a new starting point for this year. So it's not, I think they tried to paint it as equivalent to the increase in the foundation allowance, but it doesn't have the same net result for us.
Each district actually ended up receiving a different dollar amount, you know what I mean? So it was not consistent funding across the state, and I know that the governor has worked hard to level that funding when she came into office, because some districts were out of formula districts on their funding. And so she's done a lot to make everybody funded at the same level. But I feel that what ended up happening through the legislative process this past summer was unequal, not the same across districts.
Is that because every district's retiree situation is different?
Right? It was based on the composite of the people at the district and salary and retirement costs. I didn't even take the time to learn about how all of that was calculated. I was anxious just to see the number come through on the state aid status report finally, because it took a few months for it to drop. I mean, we were running the beginning of the school year without said categorical for a little while.
Just an easy question. On the rate adjustments, I don't know what UAAL means. In a brief.
So.
Basic.
Do you know what UAAL is? I would gladly look that up for you. I just know it as a slang term of UAAL, and that's what we call it, because there's your basic retirement rate, and then there's the UAAL rate component. And so it's two rates added together that we have to push through the budget.
It has to do with the retirement.
It is retirement. Okay. It's a component of the retirement, and I can look up what UAAL stands for.
No, that's all I needed to know.
And that UAAL is an in and an out. So we get the revenue for it and we push it right back out. So like we make payments to the state every month based on like what we get on the state aid status report is exactly what we pay out to ORS. So,
and once everything is funded at a certain level, I feel that the UAAL is going to decrease and decrease and decrease. And I hope at one point in time in a perfect world, it would go away.
I have it. It's the unfunded actuarial accrued liability.
Well, I liked your explanation.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks, Brad. I didn't bring my phone with me, or else I would have Googled it up here. Any other question?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next discussion item is van purchase.
Recommendation is pretty minor to your previous, when compared to your previous discussion. I am recommending that the Board of Education approve the purchase of 3 10-passenger vans from Tapper Ford LLC in Paw Paw, Michigan, for a total of $203,916 to come from our 2024-2025 general fund. So like many other districts, we have vans that we use. We often use them for smaller teams, athletics, choir clubs, and other activities. And we're at a point now where we need to retire some vans, and we also need to purchase some new vans. These new vans that we're looking at have extended running boards for safe entry and exit. We have all-wheel drive, obviously, for our road conditions, high-mount rear cameras for enhanced visibility. And at this point now, we have some vans that we don't actually use at all. And we have certain vans that we only drive within a certain radius. So these 3 new vans would help our fleet substantially. We went through a competitive bid process, and Tapper Ford of Paw Paw was our best bid that met all of our specifications, and we've included the bid tab for you as well. One of the things I do like is we currently have 8 passenger vans, and these new ones will be 10 passenger vans. We have some limitations on the maximum number of people we can put in a van by law, so we would be moving from our traditional 8 to 10. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Johnny? Very good, sir. Thank you. We'll be there again for the northern parcel offer.
I'm going to ask Ryan Ryder, who is the realtor from Berkshire Halfway, to join me in the event there are some specific questions that he needs to address. I recommend that the Board of Education approve the sale of a parcel on the campus of Portage Northern to Mark and Beth Koenig of Koenig Real Estate LLC in the amount of $35,000. This particular parcel is on the northeast corner of the campus between the highway of I-94 and 2 of the duplexes owned by Koenig Real Estate LLC. This particular buyer, they've had an interest in this particular parcel for several years, and as of the end of last year, after several conversations, we were able to engage in some discussions. I've consulted with our attorney from Troon Law Firm, and Ryan here is helping us out from a realtor perspective, and he's provided us with an estimated parcel value, and through some preliminary negotiations, the cost of the parcel that we have been able to discuss is right around $35,000. Included in your resume, in your recommendation packet is an outline of where the parcel actually lies. Also in your recommendation is a brief paragraph from the prospective buyers on how they intend to use it. Also within your packet is a breakdown of the cost that we would incur in terms of some fees related to the selling of this parcel, and then the standard agreement that's approved by Greater Kalamazoo Association of Realtors. So it is my recommendation that we dispose of the property to the prospective buyers for $35,000. Ryan or I will be happy to answer any questions from them.
The only thing I would add, Johnny, is that we do have policies in place for the disposal of real property, and the process that was followed to get to this point is aligned with our policies.
So just curiosity, is the parcel that's to the east of that still property that we own, or not?
No, the property that's east of the area that's highlighted is not owned.
Okay, good.
And it is owned, if I recall from the committee, it is owned by one of the next homeowners in that
Okay.
row. One of them owns that back parcel. And
Okay.
so this would be a separate owner owning.
Okay, great.
this one.
Yeah, if we had a larger graphic, that area to the east kind of goes into a triangle. And there's probably 5 or 6 homes in front of that parcel, and one of the 5 or 6 homeowners own that entire triangle.
Okay, great.
This particular prospective buyer owns the parcels that are identified as 528 and 520 on your graph.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Yeah, pursuant to the policy, we had a subcommittee of 3 board members review all this. with Johnny, and I think we were satisfied that everything was in order. Any other questions?
I want to thank Ryan. Because, Ryan got a cold call from us, unbeknownst to what we were trying to do. And he's been extremely helpful with helping us getting some values and some documentation as well, and working with the realtor of the prospective buyer.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next discussion item is the time clock purchase.
Evening all. Johnny was mentioning Ryan, and I thought, oh, I don't think it's my turn yet, but okay. So tonight I'm recommending that the Board of Ed approves the purchase of 20 time clocks from School Technology Associates in the amount of $72,910.80. Proceeds coming from the 2021 fund. The business office right now is currently going through a conversion from our existing Skyward finance and HR system to the new version of that. The time clocks that we have in the buildings right now are not compatible with the new system. So we purchased those original time clocks in 1718. So they've lasted a good 7 years or so. They're basically end of life. And Skyward is, because we're moving to the new system, we have to move to new. Basically, every building will get one. We also have 3 installed at the transportation building, and so we'll just be replacing those and have a couple on hand. We did go out to bid. We did receive a sole source affidavit from School Technologies, and they were the only response that we got. I'll take any questions. Yeah.
Are these the ones you have to enroll fingerprints?
They are, yep, and these new ones will have that same technology. They also have a 7-inch touch screen, just make it a little better experience for our staff members.
Ryan would like this brought to action if the board is okay with that.
Yeah.
Is there a motion, please, to take this to action?
Mr. President, I may move that we move the time clock request to action.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of moving the time clock purchase to action, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. We need a motion to approve the purchase, please.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the purchase of time clocks as requested.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you very much.
Our next discussion item is the library book purchase.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to give the recommendation that the Board of Education approve the purchase of library materials for elementary, middle, and high schools from Follett Content Solutions in the amount of $177,252.86. You might remember that we started revamping our libraries a couple of years ago in a 3-phase process. The first phase being we asked them to weed their libraries to make sure that we were taking care of any materials that weren't being circulated or the kids weren't checking out. And so after they did that process, then we went through one purchasing phase, which was our second phase, and this will be the end of that, which is another purchasing phase. So we are just excited to get materials into the libraries that students are really excited to handle and to check out. And I am here to answer any questions that you have about this purchase.
So much a question as a comment, but as a student, I remember the thrill of seeing what new books were coming into the library, which, however often they came in, and perusing them to see if I could get some of those first. And so this will be very exciting for students, I believe.
Any other questions for Mackenzie? Thank you.
Thanks, Mackenzie.
We're at the point where we're at our last discussion item, and that's the MASB Board of Directors election. Mark?
Well, I don't have a whole lot to tell you, except there are a couple of people that you may be familiar with that are running for the one-year term. It's listed there in your notes. Deanna Harrison from Kalamazoo Public Schools is one, and Elizabeth Odell from St. Joe County ISD the other. The bios are there, and I guess if you would take the time to look at those in preparation for our next meeting so that we can identify a candidate. Barb, is there anything else that you can think of on that one that they need to do?
No, just the timeline in the packet is there, so action would be needed by the next board meeting, so we meet the March, whatever it was, voting deadline.
So we'll put a motion in the agenda with the name blank, and then someone would have to recommend a name for us
Yes.
to put in there.
Yep, February 24th meeting.
Yeah, for the next meeting.
Do you know either of these candidates?
Deanna Harrison.
I met her at the
Right.
meeting.
I think everybody got an email from the other candidate. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not aware of what campaigning is going on behind the scenes, but it sounds like you all are getting some stuff.
Yeah, we will make the right choice.
I'm
Mark.
out of the loop. I'm sure you will, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Quick question, on this, on the library books, there was a discussion at the bottom about possibly moving into action. I didn't know if we wanted to do that. There's a request for moving that.
Yeah. So there was a request to move that to action. I mean, it'll take a while for the materials to get here, and once we get them, they'll have to be barcoded, cataloged, distributed, and we have limited access to staff outside of the school year. So that would be, if you feel comfortable doing that, that would be the reason we ask that to be moved to action. And I don't know how many, there are thousands of books that are coming in.
I'd like to review them.
We read every one.
Yes.
Randy is, he loves reading for pleasure, you know that.
Right, right. We okay taking this to action then?
I move
Okay.
that we take this to action.
Second.
All in favor of taking this item to action, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. We'll take it to action. Motion, please.
I move that we approve the purchase of these books as presented.
Thank you, Kimberly. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mark. All those in favor of approving the library book purchase, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Good for catching that.
Yeah.
Thanks for catching it. We forgot all about that.
And I didn't take